بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today we are doing the last session for this program, the Business Masail course for young businessmen. And after finishing all the other sections, today we will be moving on to IJARAH, that is renting and leasing, and a few miscellaneous Masail, and then we'll conclude. Again, if there are any questions at all, please feel free to send an email with the question and we'll revert to you inshallah after this. So today's section, IJARAH, which is, what is IJARAH? IJARAH is of two types. IJARAH can either mean hiring, that is a person's skills and time. Example, a tailor, a doctor, a lawyer, etc. You pay these people money and they will do a specific service for you. A different type of IJARAH is where you rent something from them. So renting is the use of an item or usufruct of a building, a factory, a house, etc. So if you are renting an item where you are going to be using that item yourself, this is also classified as IJARAH. And if you're hiring a person for his skills, this is a separate type of IJARAH. So both are classified under the same heading of IJARAH. When it comes to hiring people, there's two types of contracts. One is work-based contract. We know this as hiring a person for, it's called Ajir Mushtarak. So the person being hired, he's being hired, example, a builder, you tell him to build this house for me or build this item for me, even if it's a small room or it's fixing a light or anything he's being hired to do and you're providing the materials for him to do, is called an Ajir Mushtarak. So he can work for you and he can work for somebody else in the same day. He's not being paid for his time, he's being paid for his work being completed. So upon completing his work, he will receive his compensation. The second type, hiring a person who is an Ajir Khas, which is hiring the person based on time. So you pay him a certain amount of money per hour, or you pay him for 3 hours of work and he'll do the work. Whatever he completes in that time, whether the task that he set out to complete was reached or completed or it wasn't completed, he'll still be liable for that payment. Often we hire somebody, a laborer, a painter, we pay him the going rate of the day, hiring him for the day. Whether he works fast or slow in this type of contract won't affect his pay. He will still be liable for his time. So you can either structure the hiring on a basis where the work is being completed and then payment is due, or you can structure it where the time is being paid for and he just has to be doing the work at his own pace or whatever the pace is, but he'll be paid for the time. So as long as he's doing the work, even if it doesn't get completed, he'll be liable to take his payment. And thirdly, we have renting items or property. This also will be time-based. So you'll hire the property for 1 month, example, with renting landlords, or you can, if you're staying somewhere like a hotel room, it'll be per night generally, or whatever the general accepted practice would be, that that will be the time period that it will be taken for. But renting will only be based on time. Hiring can be based on work or it can be based on time. So renting and leasing, a few extra rules with regards to renting and leasing properties. Leasing is a contract. Leasing is a contract in which the lessor transfers the usufruct of an item or property to the lessee for an agreed period of time upon an agreed consideration. So for a contract to be valid, the price that you're paying must be known, and what benefit you're going to get from the item also must be known. So if you're renting, example, a factory, you're renting out an office space, you must be having access, you need to have servitudes, you have to be able to access the office, and the full usage of that office needs to be handed over, per se, to the lessor, and the agreed upon price has to be agreed upon in the contract. It can't be agreed upon later because that will lead to a dispute or potential dispute. So the price and the usufruct must be agreed upon at a specific, for the specific period for the lease to be valid. Number two, the subject of the lease must have a valuable usage. I didn't give an example for this. However, the subject that is being leased, it must be something that can be used. If it's something that it can't be used by the individual in question, then it won't be something that's permissible to lease out. So the usufruct has to be. There are some commodities which the you can't. It's just things you'll own, but there's no real usage that you can rent out to somebody. So those things won't be permissible to rent out. Number three, it is necessary for the item to remain in the ownership of the lessor. Therefore, if an item is of a perishable nature, such as diesel, petrol, coal, etc., then it cannot be leased, because these items will be used up when they are, well, the usufruct of these items is using up these items. When you put petrol in a car, it gets used up, and that's how you use it. So there's no returning this item later. And for the item to be leased, the ownership needs to be with the one that originally owned it, and only the usage of the item will be transferred to the lessee. So if it is non-renewable resources and they are getting used up in the process of using it, then it will not be permissible to lease these items or to rent these items. Number four, the liability in respect of ownership of an item or property is borne by the lessor or the landlord. However, the liability in respect of the usage of the item or property is borne by the lessee. This is a typo error. It's borne by the lessee. So, for example, person A leases out his property to person B. Person B is responsible for the liability of usage, that is water, electricity, etc. Anything being used by him in that property, he is liable to pay for that. And person A, who is the owner of the property, he is responsible for any payment regarding ownership, example rates, and anything that needs to be paid that is linked to ownership of that property. Water and electricity is linked to the usage. You use it while using the property. So while the item or the property is being leased by person B, in this example, he will have to be paying the water and electricity, all those things linked to the usage of that property while he's renting there. Number five, the period of a lease must be determined in clear terms. Upon reaching the date of termination, the contract will be terminated unless it is thereby renewed by both parties agreeing. However, if the consideration or the rental specified is specified on a monthly basis without a date of termination, example, 10,000 Rand a month, so you're renting the property for 10,000 Rand a month. This is what was agreed upon in the contract. Even though you don't know when you're going to stop renting it, the contract will be renewed in this case monthly, as long as the tenant is still using the property. So if he's renting, an example, 1st of January, he starts his rental, he's saying, and it's agreed by the landlord and the tenant that it'll be 10,000 Rand a month. Then on the 31st of January, at the end of the month, the tenant can move out or he can remain there. If he remains there, his remaining there would be an agreement of the new contract. So he's then liable for a full month of rent for the whole month of February or the next month. As soon as the next month starts, the first of the month comes in. If the tenant is still staying in that property, he's then liable for the next whole month's rental, and the contract will be renewed in this case. Number six, the lessee cannot use the item. So they're just going back. um, if the period of the lease is supposed to be mentioned, and if it is mentioned, like example 4 months, then upon the 4 months ending, the contract will be terminated. So as soon as that period that is mentioned, if it is clearly mentioned, is reached, once that period is reached, the end of the contract will be terminated without consulting the two parties, because it was already agreed upon in the contract. So number 6, the lessee cannot use an item or property for other than what it is specified in the agreement. So if you are renting a house, or you're borrowing a pencil, or you're renting a car, you can't, example, you're renting a car for loading up bricks, and it's a 2-ton bucky, example. You can't load the bucky with 3 tons. You can't use it for other than what is specified in the agreement. And if you said that you're borrowing the car to load in like bags of sand, you can't then load in bags of rock, or material that is heavier than sand. Also, you can't like load feathers on the car, because even though you got the same weight, the weight distribution or the method of when you use this item, it will cause damages to this item. So therefore, you can only use the item for what you specified in the contract. However, if no specified usage has been mentioned, then the lessee can use this item for any purpose that it would normally be used for. So a pencil can't be used for a doorstop, or it can't be used to jam under the table to keep the table level. It has to be used to write things down. So that's what the normal usage would be. So if you did lease something and no mention of it was made in the contract as to how you will use this item, then you'll have to use that item according to the normal rules that it would normally be used for. However, if an abnormal usage, any abnormal usage will will not be permitted unless specified in the contract. So if you are going to use the pencil to prop up the table, then you need to inform the lessor, and if he gives permission to do that, then it will be permissible. However, if nothing is mentioned, then only the normal usage of that item will be permitted. So you can have a condition which is restricting it, and you can have a condition which is loosening up the restriction. But if no mention is made, then the normal everyday use will apply. Number 7, the lessee is liable to compensate the lessor for all the damages or harms caused to the leased asset on account of negligence or misuse by the lessee. So if you rented out a car to someone and he damaged it, or he left it outside and it was stolen, or something was done by him, and on account of his negligence or his misuse of that item, damages were caused, or the item got stolen, or the harm was caused to the item, then the lessee will be liable to compensate for the damages caused. However, number 8, the leased item remains in the risk of the lessor throughout the lease agreement. So even though he's renting it out to someone else, it remains his risk, which means the lessor will be responsible for all damages of the leased asset that are caused by factors beyond the control of the lessee. For example, an earthquake, a fire, or the item got stolen even though he parked it in a garage, he parked it in a secure area. It wasn't his misuse or his negligence that caused the harm or damage. Then the lessor, the owner of the property, the risk of that property or that item will remain in his risk, and any damages that are not the fault of the lessee will be borne by the lessor. Number 9, an item or a property jointly owned by 2 or more persons can be leased out, and the rental shall be distributed to the owners in proportion to their shares owned. So if 2 people own a property and they lease it out to a third party, then based on how much ownership each partner has, they will distribute the rental accordingly, proportionately to how much they own in that property. Number 10, a partner can lease out the share of a property only to his co-partner of the same item or property and not to any other person without his permission. So if a partner wants to lease out his property, he can lease it out to a co-partner, and that will be permissible to do. Number 11, it is necessary for the leased property to be clearly identified. So example, person A said to person B, I lease to you one of my two shops. So this will be null and void. This agreement will be null and void as the leased property can't be clearly identified. It could be either shop A or shop E that is being rented out. Even though it's agreed upon by both partners, the item that is being leased out is not known. The usufruct of which item is not known. Therefore, it will be impermissible and it will be a null and void contract. The contract will then have to be repeated after specifying one of the two shops. You pick one, and when both parties know exactly which usufruct is being rented, then this will be a permissible contract. Number 12, the price or consideration of the asset must be determined at the start of the contract for the entire duration of the lease. So if it is 10,000 rand a month, it must be known that it's going to be 10,000 rand a month for the entire duration of the lease. So if you have a 5-year contract, every month the price of that month must be known. It is, however, permissible to have varying prices for different phases of the lease, provided that each amount of each phase is specified and agreed upon at the time of effecting the lease. So at the beginning of the lease, if you have, example, the first year is X amount, we'll come to an example just now, and the rest of the years are Y amount, then you have to specify both those amounts in the beginning and it will be permissible. If you don't do that, then the rental contract will be null and void. The amount being paid cannot be left to the lessor to decide at a future date, nor can it be left unknown. If you leave it to the lessor to decide, he can say run amok per se and double the rent after 1 month or after 1 year. So if you have a contract where, let's go to example very quickly. Example number 1, person A leases a house to person B for 5 years. The rent for the first year is 7,000 rand per month, and it is agreed that every subsequent year the rent would be increased by 10% more. This will be valid because 10% more we know is 700 rand if the first year is 7,000 rand. So we can calculate and understand what the next year's rental is going to be. So because it is information that is specified at the beginning of the contract, even though it's varying, this rental or this lease contract will be permissible. So you can have the first year for 7,000 rand a month and every subsequent year for 10% more. It will be permissible to do that. Example number 2, person A leased his house to person B for 5 years. Person A stipulates a condition that the rent for the first year is 7,000 rand a month, and he will determine the rent for the future years at a later stage. This is void due to uncertainty in the price. So even though the first year was specified, the years after that are not specified. So it's not a known price, therefore the whole contract will be null and void. Something to also just a point to reflect over. It is also permissible to determine the rental as a percentage of the cost. Example, 10% of 7,000 rand, or it can also be a value, example 7,000 rand plus, for example, 3,000 rand, if both parties agree. So it can be the first year is 7,000 rand and every subsequent year is 10% more on the cost. It can also be 7,000 rand for the first year plus 3,000 rand for the next year, including, so 7,000 plus 3,000 the next year, so that the rent can increase a percentage every year. It can also increase by a value every year, as long as it's agreed upon in the contract. Both will be permissible. So the next year's rent will be 10,000 rand, the next year will be 13,000 rand in that example, because it's increasing every year by a set amount. That's permissible. It can also increase by a percentage, as long as it's agreed upon in the contract. Number 13, the lessor cannot unilaterally increase the price or the consideration. So he cannot increase it even though he is informing the lessee, he still can't increase it without the lessee's permission. And if the lessee then rejects his price, he has grounds to cancel the contract and not rent this item anymore. Number 14, the price or consideration may be paid in advance, but the amount paid will remain as credit until it is due. So you can have a deposit, which is, or in today's time, what is seen like a deposit is not a rohan, which we normally say is a deposit, because a rohan, that specific item will have to be returned to the owner at the end of the contract. However, in this case, you can pay it early, you can pay in advance, but you wouldn't, the amount wouldn't be owed until it is due. So, example, you're going to move into a flat on the 1st of February, and you paid in advance for 1 month on the 1st of January. Before the 1st of February came, you decided not to take that contract, or for something came up and you canceled that contract. So this entire amount that was paid on the 1st of January will have to be returned to the lessee, because that amount wasn't due. You can also pay, example, you're going to rent for 1 year, so you paid on the 1st of January and you moved in on the 1st of February, and towards the end of the year, 1st of December, you decided to move out, and it was agreed that you will cancel. So that extra 1 month rent that you paid will be returned to the lessee at this time, as that extra month wasn't due. It only became due once the new month began. So because the contract was cancelled prior to this, the amount wasn't due, and that advance payment will have to be returned to the lessee. Number 15, the lease period will commence on the day that the leased asset was delivered, and not when the lessee starts using the property. So example, you are renting a property from the 1st of February, but you only move in on the 15th of February. So because of your delay, you didn't move in. The rent will be due on this property the moment it was freed up for you and it was delivered. The usufruct was available for your usage, and obviously with the contract agreeing that it will be starting on the 1st of February. Even though you delayed in taking or using that property, you will still be liable to pay for that property or the usage of that property as soon as the contract began, not from the time that you started using it. So if you leased a car from a car rental company and you didn't use it the whole month, but it was by you, you will be liable to pay for the rental of that car for that entire month. Number 16, and this is the last point on leasing. If a leased asset totally loses its function and is not possible to repair, the lease will be terminated on the day that the loss of function occurred. However, so whatever extra was paid or was due will be terminated at that point. It will be calculated and it will have to be tallied and returned or to the lessee. Example, halfway through the month there was an earthquake and the entire building collapsed, so it's not repairable. Then the contract will end in half the month and half the rental will be paid. The other half will have to be returned to the lessee. However, if the loss of function is due to negligence of the lessee, for example, he was experimenting in his backyard with some explosives and he blew up the house, then the lessee will be liable to compensate the lessor for the depreciated value of the asset at the point of the loss occurring. So he pays for the value of that asset at the day that it became or was destroyed. So if you caused any damages to the property, you don't pay for the property at the cost, you pay for the value of that asset at the time that the loss occurred, if the negligence was on your part, and this is what caused the damages on the property. So a few miscellaneous masail, and then we'll end this segment. And again, if there are any questions, please feel free to drop us an email at ismails@alburhan.org, and we'll try to assist. So gifting, just to iterate or reiterate, when a contract occurs, the ownership transfers when ijab and qabul are both found. So offer and acceptance, once they are found with the consideration mentioned, the ownership of the item will transfer. However, possession needs to take place for you to be able to sell it on to a third party. But if prior to possession taking place, one of the two parties has to pass away, then it will be considered that the ownership of that item has transferred merely with offer and acceptance with the consideration. With regards to a gift, there is no consideration. So for a gift to be valid, offer and acceptance and possession. So offer, acceptance, and possession is necessary for the ownership to transfer. So if somebody says, I'm giving you a gift, and you accept that I'm accepting this gift from you, but he hasn't handed it over to you, then the ownership of this gift will not transfer until possession takes place. If possession doesn't take place in that majlis, the whole gift contract will be null and void. It'll have to be redone. And without possession, a gift will not transfer ownership because there is no consideration. Had there been some consideration, had there been some payment, it would have been a contract of purchase and sale, and therefore the even if it was a minimal amount, even if it was not the value of the item, like example, you sold your car for 1 rand to somebody, that will be a valid consideration, it will be a valid price, and ownership will transfer. But if there's no payment, then only with possession transferring, again, constructive or actual possession, but possession has to be placed in the hands of the receiver for the ownership to be transferred. So if somebody said, I'm gifting you this item in my hand, and the other party accepted that I accept this gift, but it wasn't handed over, and one of them has to pass away prior to it being handed over, it will not change, the item will not change ownership, it will go into the estate of the initial party, and the gift would not have been concluded, the ownership of that gift will not be considered taken, as possession hasn't taken place yet. So a father gives something to his child. A father is the guardian for a non-baligh child. So in order for a gift to be accepted on behalf of a child, the child's wali must accept the gift and take possession of the gift on behalf of the child. So if somebody wants to give my son or my daughter something, as the father, again not the mother, the father has the right, he's the wali of the child, he will take possession on behalf of the child, he will accept the gift on behalf of the child. If he feels that it's not the best thing for his child, he can reject the gift on behalf of the child, but only on his taking possession of that gift will the gift be transferred into the ownership of the child from that point on. Now, with regards to a father gifting his own child, he's giving it to his child, and he has to take possession of the item on behalf of the child for it to be transferred. So because he is gifting and he is the one that has to take possession and receive it, then there wouldn't have to be any change of hands. Merely his intention at the time of gifting it to his son will be sufficient, and as soon as he intends it to gift it to his son or his daughter or his child, immediately the ownership will transfer because he already has possession. So the possession necessary would be for him to transfer it to himself, and since he's acting on both sides here, it will be permissible to grant the gift to his child merely by intending it. So he'll offer and he'll accept on his child's behalf, and possession will be immediately done because he has possession with him. So for a father to gift his child something, possession technically is not a requirement. It will immediately go through as soon as he intends it. Subletting. Subletting a property is permissible to a third party unless otherwise expressly prohibited by the owner. So if I'm renting and I borrowed a pencil from someone, or I rented a car from someone, I can rent it out to a third party unless the original owner expressly prohibits me from doing so. He says only I can use this property or this item for this specific period for this price, but only I'm allowed to use it. Then I cannot allow a third party to use it and charge him rental for that. The price charged, however, to the third party cannot be more than what the lessor charged originally. So subletting is permissible, but only to the limit of what was charged initially. So if I rented a house for 10,000 rand, I can only rent it out to a third party for 10,000 rand. I can't rent it out for more than 10,000. I can rent it out for less than that, thereby I'll be making a loss. However, I can't rent it out for more than 10,000 rand for that specific period. However, if there was some change that occurred on this property by the lessee in some way, then he would be permitted to charge more to the third party as a rental. So if something did change on the item, then the change came from the side of the lessee, then he can rent it out to the third party and charge more rental, a higher amount of the rental than what he is being charged. Appointing a representative, a wakil. So a wakil or a representative can be appointed to do trade on one's behalf as the buyer or as the seller. So I can appoint person A, can appoint person B to go to the shop and buy eggs on his behalf. Then he will go to the shop, he will buy it on his behalf. Also, the shop owner can appoint somebody, example a teller, to sell the goods off on his behalf. So he can appoint someone to sell the goods off on his behalf. So two people can also each appoint a separate wakil, one to be a buyer, one to be a seller, and they can conduct business on behalf of the other parties. However, all the rules that apply to the sale will apply to the wakil now. So if I told somebody to go buy this car from the dealership, and he goes and he buys it, then the rules of cancellation of the contract, any other rules that apply normally to a buyer and a seller will apply to this wakil and the seller now, not directly to me. However, a wakil, one person, cannot represent both parties in the same contract. So selling of a product, so example, person A tells person B, person A tells person C to buy this product from me, and person B tells the same person C, sell this product on my behalf. So because he'll have to take possession of this item, in this specific case, he won't be permitted to be buying on one person's behalf and selling on one person's behalf the same item. Each party will have to appoint a separate wakil or do it themselves. So a person cannot be a representative of both the buyer and the seller of the same item in the same contract. That won't be permitted to do. A non-Baaligh child transacting. A transaction of a non-Baaligh child that can understand the concept of money. So he's he is mumayyiz. So he's basically reached an age, but he hasn't become baligh yet. However, he's reached an age that he understands that he can the price of certain items, and he can go to the shop, he can take some money, he knows roughly the price of bread, the price of milk. He doesn't see them as the same value. He knows that there is a different value for different items. So he understands the concept of money. He knows that a burger will cost a certain amount of money and a car will be a much larger amount of money. He won't be easily misled into gifting something of greater value, example a gold coin, for one small meal or one sweet or something. So a child that is very small will be distinguished from a child who is not that small, and he can understand that certain things have a value, and that value will be differing not on my specific uh, needs and want at the time, but on societal's whole. The whole society will give a value to a specific item. So if somebody does understand that, the transaction of that child will be permitted, but it can be cancelled by the father or guardian, as he may still be. The father or the guardian will still be the wali of the child when he's not baligh. So he can cancel that transaction, or he can permit that transaction, because the child did have an understanding of what he was doing. However, the transaction of a non-baligh child that cannot understand the concept of money and is very small, like 2 years old, doesn't know what he's doing, that won't be permitted unless the father does it for him. So the father will have to purchase on his behalf, sell on his behalf. If he's doing it with his money, it's fine. Then the father will do it on his behalf with his money as his representative, as his wakil, as his wali. However, if the child does it himself, the transaction will be rejected, null and void. If the child reaches an age where he understands the concept of, he can distinguish between purchase and sale, and he knows what he's doing to an extent, then that can be permitted, but the father can cancel it. And once he reaches bulugh, once he becomes baligh, then the transaction will be as a normal transaction with a normal human being. So he won't need his father's permission to be able to transact. Non-baligh child gifting to a baligh person. A non-baligh child will need the permission of his father in order for a valid gift transaction to occur. So the father has to, however, the father has to do what's best for the child, Shar'an. He's bound by Sharia to do what's best for the child. So if a child who's not baligh is gifting something to somebody who's baligh, then only with the father's permission will this gift go through. And if the father, if the child is receiving something from someone, then the father has to accept this gift on behalf of the nabaligh child. However, if he feels that this is not the best thing for his son or for his daughter at the time, because it will bring more liability to his child than being an asset for his child. Example, something that has extreme expenses, if it's not managed properly, if that is gifted to a child, example a business, if it's not managed properly and the father feels that the child won't be able to manage it properly, then he can reject the gift on behalf of the child, but he's obligated by Sharia to do what is best for the child at the time. Lastly, the concept of accepted practice, or al-ma'ruf kal-mashrut. That which is known will be taken as if it is mentioned in the contract, unless it is expressly mentioned otherwise. So even though you don't mention something in the contract, if it is known in the society that we live in, this is what we call urf, or the ma'ruf thing, that which is known will be as if it is mentioned in the contract. This is how you will deal with it. Even though it's not mentioned, it's something that's is done on every contract. In this specific locality, it's done on every contract, it's known, so it'll be as if it's mentioned. However, if you expressly mention otherwise, then it won't be considered as part of the contract. We find this with the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he told a Sahabi that in a specific area, people deal in riba a lot. So if you're giving a loan to somebody in this area, then any gifts that he gives you, don't accept those gifts. Because if you give somebody a loan and he's paying back the full amount, and he gives you a gift on top of that because of that loan, then that gift is equivalent to a riba. Because you gave the loan and he paid back full and he gave you something extra on top of that. And because it's something that happens in that locality, that because you gave them a loan, they gifting you something, then that gift will be riba. So Rasulullah advised him that rather don't take that gift because it's known that people in this locality, they deal in riba. However, if it is not something where it's known, where it's ma'ruf that this is going to be happening, then if somebody gives you the gift and it's not because of that loan, even though you have a loan with him, then it will be permissible. But if it is ma'ruf, then it will be like it's mashrut in the contract. And if it's mashrut in the contract, then it will be riba and it will be impermissible to use that extra benefit. Because you took back the full amount of the loan. However, if you decrease the loan by some amount in exchange of the item that he gave you, this will also be permissible if it's an agreed upon this thing by both the parties. But if he's paying back the full amount and is gifting you something and it's known in the community, it's like it's part of the contract, and if it's part of the contract, that will be impermissible because you gave a loan, you receive something back. This is riba. You receive the full amount back and that extra back. That's why it will be impermissible. So that which is known, the accepted practice in the community will be accepted as part of the contract, even if it's not mentioned, unless expressly mentioned otherwise. So this concludes our business masail. If we did say anything wrong in any of the other presentations and today's one, please make us maaf for this. Whatever is correct is from Allah. Whatever is incorrect is from us and shaitan. We apologize sincerely for all the trouble we've caused, and we hope this benefits as many people as possible. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us and from you, and allow us to enter into Jannat al-Firdaus via means of this and anything else that we do in our life going forward. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله ونستغفر الله.